So I've got 3 points, 2 on this first bit and then the third on the bit we've yet to read. That Jesus is moved by death. He was angry and sad in that telling, deeply troubled. We remember that Jesus comes to earth as God with us, right? Not God condemning us, indifferent to his children. No, God with us, with everyone who believes in him, trusts in him. And then secondly, Jesus' call removes death. Jesus' word does that in a moment and for a lifetime. Right? It's both. He's the resurrection and the life, right? He's the start and the continuation. He is that life that continues. So Jesus' call removes death. But for Lazarus, it's only temporary. Lazarus would die again. But Jesus' death removes death permanently. We have yet to see that permanent basis. But we are to believe into it, that there is a sense in which there's a life that continues past death, and that there will then be a resurrection, which is permanent, everlasting. That is the Passover sacrifice that we're going to look at in a moment. So firstly, Jesus is moved by death. He's not unaffected by it. He's not this passive creature that does not care. He is not an untouchable God in a sense. Even though he's almighty, he allows himself to love because God is love. Because he cares, because he loves. He is hurt that we are hurt. Isn't that wonderful? When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet. Now this is a good place to be for Mary. Mary's got this one right. And Mary's always at his feet. If you read the accounts, she's just always there. That's a good place to be as a disciple of Jesus. Here she falls at his feet. Right, here she is in a position of no strength. Jesus is a good person to fall down at the feet of when you've got no strength. In other places, she's there to be taught, or she's there to worship, and that's another good place to be. But here, it's when she has no strength, when she's right grieving at the end of a tether, crying for her beloved brother. She falls at his feet. She couldn't pick a better person to fall at the feet of. And she gets a different reaction from Martha. She gets the reaction of one who is without strength. We can do this. We can fall at the feet of God. And what reaction does she get? Well, Jesus cries with her. Jesus is moved by death. It reminds me of Exodus 3 because God has operated like this for a long, long time. This is an old story of how God operates. In Exodus 3, God reveals himself to Moses in the burning bush. And God says this to Moses. The Lord said, I've indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. This is an old concern of God. He is concerned for his people. And he doesn't leave it there. It's not just, I'm concerned for my people, but I can't do anything right now. Right? My bank account's frozen. I've got a problem. No, God doesn't do that. He doesn't say, I've seen your misery, I'm concerned. He doesn't even say, I'll send an angel or something like that. No. Seen the misery, heard them crying, concerned about their suffering, so I have come down to rescue them. That's what he says back in the burning bush. And Jesus is much the same. Seen the misery, seen the tears, wept with them, concerned, cares, and now I've come down to rescue. So when Jesus saw her weeping, he saw the others weeping as well. He was deeply moved or indignant or angry, furious. Furious this could happen. And troubled. Jesus is moved by death. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, my Lord. He sees, he cares, he acts. But first he weeps. Jesus wept, and the Jews said, see how he loved him. Not only does the Lord see and the Lord cares, but we can see that the Lord cares. Right? There's proof, there's evidence. He's not just feeling it inside, but he's doing stiff upper lip. No, They saw it and they said, see how he loved him. We can see how he acts. He doesn't rescue us in secret. We can see how he cares. So Jesus sees and feels for them. He's mad and sad at death and sin and suffering. All of the above, all of the ways in which this catastrophe has happened. All of the ways too, partly this catastrophe has happened because it's our fault, and he knows that, and he knows he's got to deal with that too. He's not here in a position of blaming Mary, he's crying with her. But he's still mad that the whole thing's happened. He's still mad at what's happened to his creation. Calvin says that Christ does not come to the sepulchre, to the tomb, as an idle spectator, but like a wrestler preparing for a contest. And it will be no contest, really. Therefore, no wonder that he groans again for the violent tyranny of death, which he had to overcome, which stands before his eyes. He's seeing it. He's seeing it and he's caring. He's seeing it and he's going to overthrow it. But first he weeps. Next up, we see that Jesus' call removes death. This is in a moment, but it lasts for a lifetime. This is true of the disciples of Jesus, that Jesus' words to us, they give us power to believe. A belief which conquers death. It happens in a moment and it lasts for a lifetime, and then into eternity. So again, Exodus 3. He didn't just see, he didn't just hear the crying, he wasn't just concerned about the suffering, he came down to rescue them. That's a God of power. Jesus' call removes death. Take away the stone, he says. What good's that going to do, thinks Martha. That will just let out the death, won't it? That will just let out the smell. It will just remind us all over again. It will just be horrible. Why? Why take away the stone? Because Jesus has power. Jesus' call removes death. Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? That's a word for all of us, always, isn't it? If we believe, we will see the glory of God. This is a call to belief, deeper belief. That real life with Jesus, where sometimes, the pain is there and it lasts. But other times, and we know that ultimately, the hope is he will take that away. And he says here to Martha, take away the stone. This is more than bare facts. This is more than just, it's not just that they'll see it, but he calls for her to believe him before they see it. That's what's happening there. Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? She's got to believe first and then witness it. She's got to trust him in it, and then she'll get something real out of it. She will see that he is the way to life. David Guzik says this, that Jesus was fully capable of this miracle without the faith of Martha or Mary. It wasn't their faith that was going to do it. He was going to do it. But they would not believe. But if they would not believe, then they would never see the glory of God. They could see the end result and be happy in that, but they would miss the glory of working together with God in the fulfillment of his plan. They want to see that God's in action. They want to trust him in it. It is possible to hear or see God at work and yet not believe. When I was coming to faith, there's a group of us at our secondary school that did come to faith around sort of GCSE time or A-level time, throughout that sort of period, towards the tail end of secondary school. There was one lad, again in my year, who wasn't very interested in it, I didn't think. And then one day he was saying, I heard God speak to me. I heard his voice. Right, now that's a pretty good story. I heard God audibly with me. But the problem was, he then started to realise what that meant for his life. He started to realise what it meant to hear the call of God. And a couple of weeks later, it was only something like a couple of weeks later, what he was saying was, I don't know what I heard. That's very different. Because the call is a call to believe, to trust. I think he knows jolly well what he heard, right? But then he found out what he had to give up. And it didn't quite balance. And the thing is, Jesus is worth more Jesus is worth falling down at the feet of. Jesus wants for us infinite joy. Infinite joy. That's the goal. The glory of God, which includes our joy, includes our happiness with him forever. The glory of God is the goal. Joy comes along for the ride. It's one of the fruits of the Spirit. But this person thought, I've heard God, but I don't like what I'm hearing. Actually, it's a problem. Where do we see God at work? Where have we heard his voice? Where do we want to see more? They had to trust his call. And Jesus said to her, this is what we heard last time. I'm the resurrection and the life. That's the promise. That's who Jesus is. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? She had to believe it. Yes, Lord, she replied. But then when he calls on her to act, she's wavering. There's a deeper belief that is needed. But Martha does act properly. They took away the stone. They took away the stone and she gets this strengthening moment. They all do. Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here. He did all this for the benefit of the people that were there. And for us. And for those that will hear about it. He did this for their benefit. He waited for their benefit. He wept for their benefit. That they may believe. They may believe they will get a deeper benefit from trusting and living with Christ. When he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out. So there's words of life which only Jesus can speak. Only he could possibly do that. But there's also actions of life, our response. The dead man came out. Jesus gives us the life. He calls on us to believe. Do we respond? Do we act in the ways he wishes for us to act? Do we help each other? Jesus said to them, the crowd, take off the grave clothes and let him go. There's something Lazarus needs to do, come out the tomb. There's something those in the crowd need to do. They can help him. They can take off the grave clothes. We can help each other take off the grave clothes. We can help one another with what is no longer part of our life, which is no longer suitable. The grave clothes weren't suitable for a life lived in Jesus. Take off the clothes. So how can we act in response to Jesus' life words? We know that Jesus is the only one that gives life. He died, he was raised again. He ascended on high to the throne. There's things that only Jesus can do. Jesus brings life. But there are things we can do. Take off the grave clothes and let him go. How do we act in response to Jesus' words for us? I'm going to pause there for 30 seconds. Let's just respond to God, to whatever it is he's saying to us now. How do we respond? Right, now the second set of these verses we're going to read, and it's only going to be very brief, right? But we're just going to conclude the chapter. So anyone that wishes to can. I think I'll kick off with this one. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. What are we accomplishing? They asked. Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up. You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish.
He did not say this on his own, but as high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation, and not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and make them one. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. Therefore Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the people of Judea. Instead he withdrew to a region near the wilderness, to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples.
When cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus, and as they stood in the temple courts, they asked one another, "What do you think? Isn't he coming to the festival at all?" But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it, so they might arrest him.
Marvellous. Yeah, just very briefly on this. We can see that these are signs. Lazarus was a sign of what Jesus was going to do. But it's going to be more permanent than that. Jesus' death removes death on a permanent basis. He is the Passover sacrifice that will allow for the guilt to be removed, and therefore the transformation will come. Many Jews believed in him. It was happening. It was successful. This sign was successful. It was pointing to who Jesus was and what he was going to do. But we're still thinking ahead to the end of the story, that Jesus is going to do it. Jesus is going to be in that tomb. Jesus is going to die. Jesus is going to come back to life. Jesus is going to set them free. Amen? Yes, Jesus is going to do it. It's not just going to be Lazarus in the tomb. And Caiaphas, he's not in a very good position, right? He's not believing. He's not amongst them. But even he, God is able to use to speak good words. It's better for you that one man die for the people. Thank God that Jesus did die for the people, for everyone who would believe in him, than that the whole nation perish. He prophesied that it wasn't just the Jewish nation, but also the scattered children of God, everyone that was going to come to believe, everyone that was his child. He was going to die for them. It was almost time for the Jewish Passover. It's leading up to that. The third Passover mentioned in the book of John. The third time, the final feast of this nature. Jesus was going to go there as the Lamb. They ask, is he going to come here at all? They're trying to kill him. Is he going to come here at all? Yes, he is. At the right time, in the right place, he is going to die for them. He is going to die for us. And it's once only. Once only he will do that. That he bears the wrath, takes it away, takes away all the wrong, that those who believe in him trust that he takes away all their punishment forever and ever. Amen? So let's sing to him, to the one who does it, Christ alone.